Welcome to the MCN Festival of Motorcycling for the penultimate date of the 2021 Indian Motorcycle DTRA UK Flat Track Nationals. Peterborough's East of England showground has been a regular haunt for the series since its very early years, and after a break of some 4 seasons, an ever-present on the calendar since 2015. But the venue wasn't originally scheduled for a 2021 visit. It serves as the reserved rain date, replacing the abandoned trip to Kings Lynn in May. We were back at the Adrian Flux Arena 3 weeks ago for round 4, where a close-fought final saw Toby Hales take a second consecutive win. That means he'll be confirmed national champion a week before the scheduled season finale at the Greenfield TT, if he can extend his series lead to over 20 points this afternoon. And that margin currently sits at 18 over Jack Bell and 24 to Jordan Miller further back. Gary Birtwistle missing the late season run-in through injury. 6 real favourites for honours today, 5 of the top 6 in the championship, plus Alan Birtwistle making his first appearance since sealing the 2017 title, and his first on electric machinery. The Alta makes its debut with the DTRA. 33 riders tackle 3 races apiece in the standard heat format, but there'll be 4 heats per round here, so the points needed to qualify inside the top 12 likely to be slightly higher than usual, although 3 top 3 finishes remain the target. Look at the lineup for Heat 1. It's Brad Hardman, Simon Gray and Simon Bird on the front row. Freddie Trott Jr., Mike Goodfellow and Alan Birtwistle from the second. From the back row of the grid, Leah Toklov, Stephen Gurnhill and Emily Moore complete the lineup. Heat 1, the opening race of the day here at the East of England showground, gets underway, and it's a fine start from the middle of that second row from Mike Goodfellow. The whole shot for Simon Bird on the outside of the front row. The two of them now pursued by Alan Birtwistle. Gets around the outside of the pit's bend to pass Mike Goodfellow for second now alongside Simon Bird in the battle for the lead, and the number 30 zips through. Alan Birtwistle, within a lap of his return to the DTRA, is a race leader with us once again. The 2016 and 17 national champion, of course, the man who ended Aidan Collins' run at the top in this series, and a series regular from 2011 to 2017, making his return for the first time since then and bursting away out in front. Super stuff from Alan Birtwistle early on. The race now is for second. It's a 3-way tussle. Leah Toklov working her way well through the order, having started from the inside of the back row. She now picks off Mike Goodfellow down the back straight and through for third position. Goodfellow running back around the outside of the top end to see if he can get back on terms, as Simon Bird seemingly holds back the pace of the race here from second position, and Freddie Trott Jr. also beginning to close. Didn't make the best of starts, Freddie Trott, as Toklov gets out of shape there coming off turn number 2, gives a bit of breathing room to Simon Bird, but I expect that gap to come down quickly. Oh, talking about coming down, Alan Birtwistle has fallen from the lead. Mike Goodfellow runs wide to try and avoid him. Freddie Trott Jr. has gone from 5th to 3rd, and the battle now between Simon Bird and Leah Toklov is for top spot in heat number 1, and Toklov's got that gap now down to less than a bike length as they steam their way once again in towards turns 3 and 4. The race lead for Simon Bird, second as things stand for Leah Toklov. 1 lap to try and find her way through. Bird occupying the inside line, Toklov trying to go even tighter. No way through there. Bird doing very well to defend track position throughout this race. It was for second, it's now for the lead. Oh, Bird gets out of shape. Toklov bumps her way through. Opportunity for Freddie Trott to carry his momentum as well, and Trott comes through for second place in the run down to the line. Simon Bird relegated from 1st to 3rd. Spectacular stuff for an opening race of the day, and if proceedings continue on in that fashion, then we're in for a corker at the East of England showground here this afternoon. Leah Toklov currently outside of the top 10 in the championship, really looking for a reversal in fortunes today after what's been a tough 2021 so far. Comes up with her first race victory of the season, and in flying style as well, managing to battle her way through from the back row of the grid. She wasn't going to get near to Alan Birtwistle, little doubt about that, but the number 30 making an uncharacteristic error from the lead, and that converted the battle between Simon Bird and Leah Toklov into a scrap for top spot. Bird overcooking it coming in towards turn 3, and that momentary error allowing Leah Toklov to come through, and then Freddie Trott around the outside. Spectacular entertainment in the opening race of the day. The win going to Leah Toklov ahead of Freddie Trott Jr. and Simon Bird. Less than a second covering the top 4. Mike Goodfellow was never out of it either. Bit of a gap to the rest of the pack. Stephen Gurnhill rounding out your top 5. Alan Birtwistle remounting for 7th. Moving straight on with Heat 2, this one features Rob Meir on the number 500. currently 5th in the standings, and that despite missing the visit to the Greenfield Oval. 2 third places in a row for him. Lining up from pole, this should be a banker for him. He starts as the comfortable favourite. The next best ranked rider in this field is the number 69 Conrad Little, and he makes his first appearance since round 2, which he finished in 6th. Watch for him coming through from the back. Remember, every rider will line up from each row of the grid once during their 3 qualifying heat races, so a big haul for Little here will move him one step closer to the top 12 and a place in the final. Number 500, Rob Mears, 77, Steve Newsham, and 420, Chris Brock line up off the front row for heat number 2. The number 13, Gary Inman, and Wag Scott, the number 197 behind them. The number 36, Joe Banks, 69, Conrad Little, and 105, Sam Neville complete the lineup. Starting marshal points to the light. When that goes out, we're underway with heat 2. Great start from Rob Mears off gate number 2 as ever. The battle for second position with Steve Newsham covering the inside line. Chris Brock trying to go around the outside, coming off the pits bend, squeezes past down the back straight. That's a good effort early on from Chris Brock through into second. So it's Mears who leads it. Brock second. Third with Steve Newsham, but maybe not for much longer. The 69 of Conrad Little is already through from the back row of the grid and straight up into third place at the end of the opening lap. So it's now Little who will mount an assault on Brock for second place. Brock doing well to keep up with Rob Mears around the opening lap of this East of England showground in Heat 2. The top 3 starting to break now from Newsham, who's occupied in a battle for 4th place, with Sam Neville coming through from the back row of the grid. Joe Banks, a steady start but unspectacular behind these two, and it is a good start to this race for Sam Neville, who's got that gap now down to less than a bike length between himself and Steve Newsham. That's over 4th position. Neville not quite able to squeeze through at the end of the opening lap. Brock is leaving Conrad Little behind him. Now, this is an excellent ride from the number 420 and wasn't far adrift of Rob Mears as they came off turn number 2. A more sedate race than we saw in the opener, that's for sure. Looks like Rob Mears just keeping things under control, but what an excellent effort it's been so far from Chris Brock just to keep up with the pace of Rob Mears, who's been a podium finisher in each of the last 2 rounds of this season. Neville still trying to prize his way through on the inside of Steve Newsham for 4th place and 9 points in this one. Heat number 2. Neville now moves to the outside line into turn 3. He's going to go for the cutback of 4, but I think Newsham just about steady enough as they head into the final lap to hold on for this 4th position. Riders getting bottled up now behind Steve Newsham as Joe Banks begins to gain a little bit of ground. I think that's going to be a little bit too late though for him to make an impression. Neville again going wide here in towards turn 3 as Rob Mears takes the checkered flag comfortable in the end ahead of Chris Brock. But what a great effort it was from Brock to hang on in there at least until the final 2 laps of that race. Steve Newsham behind, picked off in the closing stages by Sam Neville. So Neville moving himself up into 4th position. 5th place then going to Newsham with Joe Banks behind in 6th. But the double figure scorers, Rob Mears taking the 15 heat points ahead of Chris Brock 2nd for 12 and Conrad Little 3rd for 10. And that's good enough news for Little, given that he's come through there from the back row of the grids.
Second was 420 and Chris Brock, a winning margin 1.69 seconds. Third was number 69 Conrad Little, and 4th place on the line 105.
Heat 3 and an interesting matchup in prospect here between veteran Paul Young and young gun Jack Bell. Young only 6th in the standings, but he was one of the top performers during the heat stages at Kings Lynn. Just missed out with a little bit of fortune in the grand final. Bell, meanwhile, fresh from his first senior podium, a fine 2nd place at the Atrium Flux Arena, and both will have to come through the field in this one. Sturgis perhaps the biggest threat to them. He goes from the pole. George Sturgis then, the number 55 already into position. 728 Jesse Moore alongside him, and then the number 159 of Luke Gardner. From the middle row of the grid, the 75 Paul Young, 7 Neil McQueen, 135 Pete Marshall. From the back row, 68 Joseph Brindley, 233 Guy Horner, and 93 Jack Bell. A little bit of confusion there with Joseph Brindley somewhat optimistically trying to line up from the middle row of the grid. He is scheduled for the inside of the back row, and the 9 riders are once again in position. This time it's heat number 3. Watch out for Jack Bell coming from the outside of the back row. He's already making swift progress. It's George Sturgis with the hold shot, largely as predicted. The battle now for 2nd. Luke Gardner's made a decent jump from the outside of the front row, but he's moved aside by Paul Young. They're trying to go either side of him now around the top turn. Neil McQueen, the number 7, through on the inside up into 3rd position. Gardner manages to hold off Jack Bell though. The inside line, the place to be early on. Bell switches his attack around the pit's turn at the start of lap 2 and is thrown on the inside of Gardner for 4th position. Old sparring partners, of course, coming through the youth ranks, both Luke Gardner and Jack Bell, but Gardner being left somewhat now in 5th position. It's a 4-way scrap for the lead. Sturgis moved aside by Paul Young as they come in to start lap 3. That opens the door for Neil McQueen. Might also open the door here for Jack Bell, who comes storming through down the back straight, and George Sturgis has gone quickly from 1st to 4th. Race on up front as Paul Young has found his way through to lead it, but Neil McQueen looks the faster of the two of them, and Jack Bell arguably faster than the pair in front of him. And the three riders absolutely nose to tail as they come in towards turns 3 and 4. Bell trying to go the long way round, but the racing line in the early stages here at the East of England Showground has very much been on the inside, and by going the longer route, Bell begins to slip back. Still no way through for Neil McQueen. Riders who've been able to defend track position, forcing their rivals to go further than them, have generally been able to hold station in the early stages. The opening round of heats here at the East of England Showground. They're now into the final lap of Heat 3. Bell trying the outside again on the pits bend. Can he get the run on Neil McQueen? Will McQueen be held back by Paul Young sufficiently to allow Bell to get through? Bell goes for one last-ditch effort around the outside on turns 3 and 4, but he locks it up. Neil McQueen switches to the inside coming off the final turn. It gets very close in the run down to the line. Paul Young, though, for my money, just about held on. Great riding that from Neil McQueen, the number 7, making his first appearance since round 3 at the Amman Valley, and a grand finalist in each of his 2 appearances in 2021. Very much keeping Paul Young honest there in Heat 3, but it is Young who's over the line for the 15 race points for the checkered flag, and both riders, Young and McQueen, doing exceptionally well to hold back Jack Bell, who appeared at stages of that race to be faster than them, but could find no way through. Forced to do the chasing around the outside line. He was only able to make his moves by switching to the inside, for example, on Luke Gardner. Gardner eventually slipping back, but does hold on for 5th position. So it's a win for Paul Young ahead of Neil McQueen in 2nd. Jack Bell gets 3rd, then it's George Sturgis. Gardner ahead of Jesse Moore, Joseph Brindley, and Guy Horner ahead of Pete Marshall, who rounds out the finishers. Heat number 3, and another excellent start to his heat programme for Paul Young, just as we saw from him last time out at Kings Lynn. Heat 4 is the toughest race of this opening block at Peterborough. 3 of the DTRA's youth stars, including the current championship leader Toby Hales, the favourite for this one as he lines up off the front row. Watch out as well for Jordan Miller and Fergus Bluff coming through from the back. Miller 4th in the championship and with a chance of moving up into the medal positions today. Bluff, who impressed on his pro debut at Kings Lynn, despite walking away empty-handed, just 1 position behind the top 15 who score. So it's the number 20, Toby Hales, on the inside of the front row. Alongside him, the 129, William Smith, and the 909, James Woodruff. Paul Cooper alone on the middle row, the number 31. And from the back row of the grid, the number 19, Jordan Miller, the number 111, Wesley Aegis, and the number 56, Fergus Bluff. Interested to see how Paul Cooper will get on here today. The grass track and former Sheffield Speedway rider, did dabble particularly in the early years of the flat track series in the UK, but I understand he's had a couple of runs out at Scunthorpe in preparation for his appearance today. Jordan Miller, the last rider to settle into position, and now we're ready to go with heat number 4. Good start from the number 20, Toby Hales. Decent jump as well from William Smith, who occupies 2nd position around the first 2 turns. James Woodruff trying to get on terms as Hales bursts quickly away down the back straight as largely expected. So the race for 2nd position early on. Further back down the order, meanwhile, Fergus Bluff doing well to hold off the challenge of Jordan Miller on the opening lap. Miller, though, now on the number 19 coming through and occupying 4th position. So it shouldn't be too long before Miller and perhaps Bluff, if he can tag on to the tail of the number 19, get on terms with the number 909, James Woodruff, who still occupies 3rd position for the moment at least. Further back down the order, surprising to see Wesley Aegis struggling in the early stages of Heat 4. See if he can make up any ground later on. Paul Cooper struggling in this company, stranded out at the back. Miller now alongside Woodruff and comes through in straightforward fashion for 3rd position. Woodruff looked a little bit unsettled there going into the top bend, and Miller didn't need a second invitation to come through. He's now tagged onto the tail of the number 129, William Smith. This would be a great ride from Smith if he can stay where he is, even if he ends up relegated behind Jordan Miller, which you'd anticipate. He'll do well if he can take a double-figure points tally from this, his opening ride. still defending well, the number 129, as they come around the pits turn once again. Miller still not quite able to get alongside. Overtaking has proven tough in the early stages of this meeting. The inside line very much the place to be. And Jordan Miller now prizes his way through. Smith relegated into third position as they come into the final lap. Miller way too far adrift to even think about getting on terms with Toby Hales, who is going to be a race winner here in heat number 4. It's back-to-back rides for Toby Hales, who'll appear next time out as well in heat number 5. But he gets his meeting off to the best possible start. Could be the day that he declares himself UK national champion for the second time, and he's going the right way about it. A comfortable race victory from the inside of the front row for Toby Hales. Second over the line for Jordan Miller. Had to do his battling from behind, eventually squeezed his way past William Smith, but a great ride from Smith to hold on for third position after being picked off by Miller. Further back, James Woodruff also with an excellent effort as he holds on for fourth, ahead of the likes of Fergus Bluff in fifth, and Wesley Aegis surprisingly restricted to sixth. That's going to leave him with a lot of work to do in his remaining 2 rides.
Race winner then, number 20, Toby Hales. Second, number 19, Jordan Miller. And third, 129, William Smith. Fourth was 909, James Woodruff. Fifth, 56, Fergus Bluff. 6-1-1, Wesley Aegis.
Into the second round of races here at Peterborough, with Toby Hales, Paul Young, Rob Meir and Leah Toklove leading the way. Jordan Miller, Neil McQueen, Chris Brock and Freddie Trott Jr. all with second places first time out. William Smith, Jack Bell, Conrad Little and Simon Bird currently occupying the last of the qualification positions, and the likes of Alan Birtwistle, Wesley Aegis and George Sturgis all behind. Next up, heat 5, Toby Hales making his second appearance of the day, and this time from the middle row after his victory from pole in heat 4. Watch out as well for Freddie Trott Jr., who was excellent value at Kings Lynn a few weeks ago, only 10th in the end, but that was largely as a result of misfortune. Second place despite a fairly subdued opening ride, and Trott will be coming through from the back row here. Well, Joe Banks is due to line up from the middle of the front row next time out. He's positioned himself incorrectly at the start line for heat number 5. He moves on to the infield and we're now ready to go. Start marshal moves away, riders under starters orders and underway. Flying start from Toby Hales, cuts between 2 riders off the front row of the grid in the run down to turn number 1 and takes the whole shot from the second row. Fergus Bluff now coming through on the inside of Stephen Gurnhill to occupy second place. Great start as well from Freddie Trott from the inside of the back row. He's now moving through on Stephen Gurnhill and up into third position. So the pre-race favourites now occupy the top 3 positions and the double figure points hauls, and it's a separate fight further down the order from 4th position back. At the moment, it's Stephen Gurnhill who lined up on the front row, who occupies it. Simon Bird coming on strong. He has come through from the inside of the middle row. He's now chasing the tail of Stephen Gurnhill for 4th. Sam Neville there looked for the outside line on the top bend. He's left himself offline. That's allowed Gary Inman to come through, but Inman only scored 6 points first time out, so could do with making up the 2 positions in front of him. What's for sure is that he's not going to get to the top 3. Toby Hales bursting well clear now. Fergus Bluff starting to come under some pressure from Freddie Trott, and Trott, who was second in his opening ride, looking for another 12 points haul from this one, heat number 5. That's where the race is at the moment, with a separate scrap from 4th position down. As you can see, all 5 riders in the mix for that one, as Freddie Trott now gets alongside back into turn number 1, but Bluff just has enough around the outside on turns 1 and 2 to hold station in second position. Good action here for P2, but it's all a futile effort to try and take victory in this one. That's going to go the way of Toby Hales. We're into the closing stages now. Bluff has built a bit of a buffer over Freddie Trott. This is going to be one of the youngsters' most impressive rides yet with the DTRA. Now up as a senior rider, now up with the pros, and it's going to be a fine second place for Fergus Bluff, who moves one step closer towards his first pro grand final. That's 20 points from 2 rides. He'll be on the bubble after this second round, but it's a fine victory from Toby Hales, as you might have expected, and particularly once he'd cut his way through the middle of Fergus Bluff and Stephen Gurnhill. 2 riders lining up on the front row of the grid. Hales from the middle row cuts between them and roars away for victory from there. The winner of Heat 4 is also the winner of Heat 5, and he's the meeting leader with 30 points out of a possible 30. Second place going the way then of Fergus Bluff, as I said, moving on to 20 points from 2 rides. That's an excellent effort from him. Another double figure score from Freddie Trott Jr. He keeps his options for a place in the grand final very much open here today, and a separate fight behind that lead trio, and almost 3 seconds the gap between Freddie Trott Jr. and Stephen Gurnhill, who takes 9 points from heat number 5. Simon Bird rounding out your top 5.
555 Simon Bird, 6th 909 James Woodroff, 7th number 13 Gary Inman, and 8th 105 Sam Neville.
Two of the round 1 heat winners meet here in heat 6. Leah Toklove, who took heat 1, and Rob Meir, the winner of heat 2, each aiming to join Toby Hales on 30 heat points after his victory last time out. Meanwhile, Jack Bell, currently second in the championship, is looking for his first victory of the afternoon after he was held back in 3rd place first time out. On the front row, 3 riders who were low scorers in their opening outings. The number 197 Wag Scott, she's on 5. The number 36 Joe Banks on 7. And the 68 Joseph Brindley on 6. From the middle row of the grid, the number 93 Jack Bell, 3rd place first time out. The 55 George Sturgis, he's on 9. And heat 1 winner, the number 37 Leah Toklove. From the back row of the grid, the number 500 Rob Meir, winner in his opening outing. The number 81 Mike Goodfellow, he is on 9. Heat 6, 3 clear favourites. We're underway. Fine start from Joe Banks, a slower one from Wag Scott, who begins to drop back, and it's Banks who takes the whole shot. Second early on is with Joseph Brindley. He's going to be picked off either side, though, coming off turn 2. Jack Bell through on the inside line for second. George Sturgis also moving through on Brindley. He's up into 3rd. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, it will be Jack Bell who leads at the end of the opening lap. Joe Banks beginning to slip back now. Leah Toklove through on the inside of George Sturgis around 1 and 2, and Sturgis is also going to drop behind Meir as Toklove passes Banks. Oh, bit of a misjudgment there from Rob Meir. He dived through on the inside of George Sturgis, but then had to take some avoiding action to not go up the back of Leah Toklove into turn 3. Almost skirted the air fence. In fact, I think he was touching the skirting along the bottom of the air fence coming around turn 3 and 4. He's gathered it up now in 3rd position, but has left himself an awful lot of ground to make up to try and challenge the likes of Leah Toklove in 2nd, and Jack Bell, the early race leader. Dropping back in 4th position here is Joe Banks, and again we've got a separate race from 4th position back, just as we did in heat number 5. George Sturgis made decent early progress, but has now been halted by Joe Banks. And behind Sturgis, you can see Mike Goodfellow, who's made progress from the back row of the grid, passing Joseph Brindley, as well as Wag Scott, although I think he'd made up progress on Wag Scott by the exit of turn number 2. Now, Meir's made up the lost ground on Leah Toklove after his misdemeanour going into turn 3 a lap or so ago, but how quickly will he be able to find his way through, because he's got just a lap to try and make this move. Look at the distance that Jack Bell has in hand, the number 93, looking good for his first race victory, and he's going to defeat 2 riders who won their opening outings, who at the moment are scrapping over 2nd place. It's going to be close in the run down to the line here. Leah Toklove holds on. So Toklove, with 15 points first time out and 12 in her 2nd ride, is already within touching distance of a place in the grand final, and it'll only be her 2nd final of this 2021 season if she can manage it. Victory for Jack Bell. He's well on his way as well. 3rd place first time around, so he now moves on to 25 points from 2 rides after beating Leah Toklove and Rob Meir, who, as I said previously, took victories in their opening outings. Bell coming round for a lap of honour, celebrating with the spectators here on the start-finish straight. But another fine ride from Leah Toklove, and she'll be satisfied with that. Rob Meir getting into mischief, working his way through from the back row of the grid, so he is restricted to 3rd, but did very well, to be perfectly honest, just to stay on the bike, and eventually gathers himself up to continue the fight for 2nd position. 3rd going the way of Meir then. A big gap then of over 4 seconds to Joe Banks, who successfully defends 4th, ahead of George Sturgis and Mike Goodfellow, who rounds out your top 6.
7th, number 68 Joe Brindley, and 8th 197.
The highlight of that one, a really action-packed 2nd lap for Rob Meir. Actually does very well not to collect either Joe Banks or Leah Toklove. I think stands the bike up to avoid collecting Joe Banks' left foot, because Banks is already committed to the inside line in towards turn 3, and then has to go straight on to avoid Leah Toklove. Does a little bit of a wall of death before recovering that 3rd place. On with heat 7, Jordan Miller from the middle row, probably the favourite here, but no less than 4 riders in this field came away with double-figure points hauls in their opening rides, and therefore remain in contention for qualification. A look at the lineup in full. It's Wesley Aegis, the number 111 on the inside of the front row. He's on 7 points from his opening ride, so plenty of work still for him to do. The number 135 of Pete Marshall, he's on 4, and the 69 of Conrad Little, He scored 10 points in his opening outing from the middle row. The 227 of Emily Moore, she's on 4. The number 76 of Brad Hardman, he's on 7. And the number 19 of Jordan Miller, second place in his opening ride. The same tally for Chris Brock, the number 420, very impressive in his opening outing. And the number 7 of Neil McQueen, they go off the back row of the grid with Simon Gray, the number 16 between them, he's on 5, and Jesse Moore on 7, the number 728 going off the outside of the back row. Brad Hardman raises his hand as he needs to get the machine restarted before this Heat 7 can get underway. He's now ready to go. The starting marshal then puts them under starters' orders. 7th race of the day at the East of England Showground. Looked as though a couple of riders were creeping before the light went out, but we are underway nonetheless. Fine start from the outside of the front row from Conrad Little. Wesley Agers boxed in somewhat in the early stages by Pete Marshall. He's now got clear of the number 135 and up into second place. Great start once again from Chris Brock, really making a name for himself here today. He's up into third position. Jordan Miller without such a good getaway, but he's up into 4th place nonetheless. Remember, Miller coming through from the outside of that middle row. Neil McQueen pegged all over the back of him, and McQueen almost with an opportunity to come through there into turn 3. Might make it an opportunity to come through off turn 4. Miller's left the door wide open, and that's where the race is at the moment for 4th position. Both of them beginning to make ground on the riders in 2nd and 3rd places, though. This is much more like it from Wesley Agers, who, as I said previously, could only score 7 points in his opening ride, so desperately needs a double-figure haul from this one, heat number 7. He's in line to get it as things stand. The race now is over 3rd. Chris Brock coming under attack from Jordan Miller. Miller sent it in from a fair way back there. He's moved Brock off the line, but still the number 420 is holding firm. Another excellent display from Chris Brock after his 2nd place in his opening outing. Miller can't quite get through still as they come off turn 4. Starting another lap, Wesley Agers now beginning to mount an attack on Conrad Little for the race lead. Little, who was 3rd place in his opening ride, stands to pick up 15 points in this one, move on to 25, and within touching distance of a place in the grand final. Wesley Agers needs every point he can get. Looks as though they're starting to back up the riders behind now. Jordan Miller through on Chris Brock for 3rd position. Miller's now going to try and go around the outside of Wesley Agers coming off turn 2. Agers pegs him up against the safety fence down the back straight, the Indian Motorcycle branded back straight, and Miller keeps on coming, but Agers moves him further and further and holds on for 2nd place in the run down to the line. So Miller will have to content himself with a 3rd position finish after a 2nd place first time out, and I fancy he would have been expecting more than that. It's Conrad Little who's the surprise winner of heat number 7, made a jet-propelled getaway off the outside of the front row and defended position successfully from there. Try as he might, Wesley Agers couldn't make up for his uninspiring start, and having been boxed in by Pete Marshall around the first 2 turns on the inside line, couldn't then get back on terms with Conrad Little. And then it was all about Jordan Miller coming through from the outside of the middle road. Not exactly a sparkling start from Jordan Miller, but he does eventually get through for 3rd position and holds on ahead of Neil McQueen, crucially. McQueen, another promising ride from him there, but only 9 points from it, so he needs a double-figure score most probably from his next one, heat 9. In the meanwhile, a look at the result of heat 7. Little wins it, but less than a second cover the top 4, and Chris Brock wasn't too far behind either. Very competitive race. Little, Agers, Miller, McQueen and Brock, the order among your top 5. Well, Wesley Agers made up plenty of ground with a 12-point score there. Now it's over to Alan Birtwistle with points to recover in this one, Heat 8. The former champion having fallen from the lead of the opener, by which stage he seemingly had it sewn up. It'll be interesting to see how he stacks up against Paul Young here. Young, of course, the winner of Heat 3. And behind them, William Smith, who had an excellent first ride. He now goes from the outside of the middle row. On the inside of Smith, the number 233, Guy Horner, he's on 5 points. The number 159, Luke Gardner, he scored 8 in his opening outing. Just settling into position from the back row, the number 31, Paul Cooper, he's on 6. And the 77, Steve Newsham, 8 points for him in his opening ride. But the 2 favourites, the 2 riders off the front row, the 30, Alan Birtwistle, and the 75, Paul Young. Lights out and away they go, and it's Alan Birtwistle who makes the fastest start, an electric jump from the electric machine, and he claims the whole shot. Paul Young into 2nd position, William Smith faster than the other 2 riders from the middle row, and Guy Horner's dropped immediately backwards behind the 2 riders who started from the back row, Paul Cooper and Steve Newsham. But at the end of the opening lap, it's Alan Birtwistle back where he was by the end of the opening lap of his opening ride. Now remember, that'll turn to Ash's first time out as he came down and could only remount for 6 race points. Needs a big haul here to keep himself in with a chance of taking a place in the grand final. And of course, seeding position will also become crucial in the third round of heat. Luke Gardner prizing a line down the inside of William Smith. And Gardner, who scored 8 points first time out, if he can pick up 10 points in this one, keeps himself in contention for a place in the grand final, with a single ride still to come for each of the riders, the 33 competitors here at Peterborough this afternoon. Top 2 have well and truly separated themselves out from the rest of the pack, as we largely predicted. And Gardner doing well now to occupy third position ahead of William Smith. Paul Young, it looks to the naked eye as though he's come back at Alan Birtwistle over the last lap or so. Don't know whether he's quite going to be able to get on terms with Birtwistle in what remains of this one, heat number 8. It's Birtwistle looking good for his first race victory since his return to the DTRA here today. Birtwistle pulling away now from Paul Young as they come in towards the final lap. It doesn't look as though there's going to be a repeat of his mistake from his opening ride. Birtwistle is not going to allow this one to slip. He desperately needs the 15 points to bring himself back into provisional qualification places. Remember, 12 move through to the grand final. Birtwistle takes 15, his first race victory in this 2021 season. His first appearance, of course, of the campaign here in Peterborough this afternoon. He wins ahead of Paul Young. First defeat of this meeting for the number 75. And a fine third position for Luke Gardner, and one he can be highly satisfied with. But that one of the more sedate affairs of this afternoon so far. Birtwistle pulling out half a bike length by the time they got to the first turn, commands things ahead of Paul Young, who nibbles back at the deficit but can only in the end settle for second place. Still well and truly good enough to make Paul Young one of the main contenders for a front row grid slot in today's grand final. Just needs a good third ride, and the third round of heats coming up shortly. Third place going the way of Luke Gardner, then he brings himself back into contention for a place in the grand final. William Smith slipping away in the end from the top 3, but still 9 valuable points banked by him. Paul Cooper, Steve Newsham and Guy Horner rounding out your finishers to heat number 8.
Before we get underway with our afternoon session, there'll be practice sessions.
Fine start it was from Alan Birtwistle. Therefore, the action was all in the battle for third position behind. Luke Gardner finding his way through on William Smith for what could yet prove a valuable third position and 10 heat points.
On the front of the grid with number 81, that's Mike Goodfellow. 13, Gary Inman, and number 7.
Final round of qualifying heats then, and Toby Hales is the only remaining unbeaten rider. Paul Young and Leah Toklove 3 points behind him. A 3-way tie for the last of the provisional front row slots for the grand final. 12 riders separated by just 5 points. A seemingly separate battle for the rest of the qualification positions, and no less than 5 of those lining up in this one, heat number 9. The cut-off stands at the moment at 20, and as I said in the build-up, we could be looking at 30 points needed then to make it through to the grand final. Mike Goodfellow, Gary Inman and Neil McQueen on the front row, Jesse Moore, Steve Newsham and Fergus Bluff on the middle, George Sturgis and Simon Bird off the back row. 9th race of the day, first of the round 3 heat races gets underway. Flying start from Mike Goodfellow. And Goodfellow on 16 points coming into this race, much in need of a big double points haul here if he's to have hopes of making it through to the grand final. Is the man out in front. Second place at the moment is with George Sturgis, just nosing ahead of Neil McQueen as they came in towards turn 3, and now ripping around the outside of him and Mike Goodfellow to hit the front. Well, George Sturgis capitalising on the fact that Neil McQueen had been boxed in somewhat by Mike Goodfellow on that opening lap and surging past a pair of them. Goodfellow now has dropped to third. It looks as though his hopes of qualifying through to the grand final are in tatters, and he's now picked off by Fergus Bluff as well. Bluff actually followed in the tyre tracks of George Sturgis around the outside on the opening lap to come through on Simon Bird, and he's continuing to make progress. Now it's all about Neil McQueen. He's been fast throughout this afternoon's entertainment. He finished second in his opening ride, backed it up with a 4th place finish last time out, and he's looking in control of a place in the grand final as things stand. He could improve his seeding position even further if he comes through here on George Sturgis. Cut back off turn 2, not quite successful. Still daylight in front of the number 55, George Sturgis. A 9 and 8 point score from his middle row and back row grid slots. A victory here would certainly see him through to the grand final. Second place may yet not be enough, and he's relegated backwards by Neil McQueen. And if Sturgis is picked off now by Fergus Bluff as well, then Sturgis surely would be eliminated. Bluff then with an outside line around turns 3 and 4. Sturgis a man under pressure. He's already been picked off by Neil McQueen. McQueen's been one of the top performers this afternoon at Peterborough so far. Now it's Fergus Bluff who is on the attack. Almost got through on Sturgis there coming off turn 2. The number 55 just about back across the racing line coming off turn 2. Surely that will now be enough for him to hold on. It's Neil McQueen who will take the checkered flag, and George Sturgis takes second, keeping alive his chances of a place in the grand final today. Likewise for Fergus Bluff. Third position for him moves him on to 30 points. Could it be the first time that we've seen Fergus Bluff into a grand final in senior competition among the pros? Neil McQueen then victorious, as I said previously, adding to that second place finish behind Paul Young from heat number 3 with his first race victory of the day. That will see him comfortably through to today's grand final on 36 heat points. It's tighter for the riders behind him, but a second place finish for George Sturgis makes up for some of that disappointment earlier on, particularly drop points in his second ride, and third place going the way of Fergus Bluff. Another double figure score, second in a row for him, should be enough to see him through to today's grand final on 30 points. Confirmed results of heat number 9 then. Neil McQueen wins it to move on to 36, second going the way of George Sturgis. 12 points for him moves him on to 29. It's going to be tight for qualification for him, but at least he keeps his options open by holding on ahead of Fergus Bluff in a close finish, with the top 3 separated by less than a second. Our focus now turns back to the top seeding positions. 3 of the top 4 in points terms meeting here in Heat 10. Toby Hales looking to complete a maximum from the qualifying heats, but has a back row grid slot here. Leah Toklove from the front row has only dropped 3 points so far to Jack Bell in Heat 6. Meanwhile, Conrad Little, the winner of Heat 7, is only 2 points behind her, and Freddie Trott should be through to the grand final, but probably needs a top 5 finish here to make sure. Off the front row of the grid, it's the number 227, Emily Moore. She's on 7 points. The number 37, Leah Toklove, 27 out of a possible 30. And the 253, Freddie Trott Jr., 22 points. 2 top 3 finishes so far. From the middle row of the grid, the Heat 7 winner, Conrad Little. He's on 25 points, the number 69. The number 909, James Woodruff. He's on 16. He and Joe Banks, the number 36, would need big results here to make it through to the grand final. From the back row of the grid, Toby Hales, Pete Marshall and Brad Hardman. Heat 10 gets underway. It's a good start off the outside of the front row from Freddie Trott Jr., but Leah Toklove has the racing line and moves him aside. Trott Jr. then gets back to the inside coming off turn 2 to cover off the attack of Conrad Little and successfully defends second place. Little in third then. Toby Hales already through into fourth, came through in straightforward fashion on Joe Banks, and that's how they sit at the end of the opening lap. Toklove leading it. Freddie Trott second, but might not be for much longer. Comes around the outside of Toklove coming off turn 2. Side by side, they're jousting as they head into the top turn. Freddie Trott going the long way round. Toklove has the inside line, but Freddie Trott is irrepressible and fires his way through. Toklove then relegated to second. Toby Hales, meanwhile, still trying to nibble his way through on Conrad Little for third position. So Hales being kept back from the race leading spot because Little is riding a good race here in third place. He's moved out of the way now by the number 20. Hales through for third. Moves up to the outside as they come into turn 1. Will try to follow in the tyre tracks of Freddie Trott, who made his way around the outside, remember, of Leah Toklove. Hales is hoping to do the same. The number 20 hasn't been beaten so far here this afternoon. Freddie Trott trying to escape away out in front. It's going to be a tortoise and a hare situation now as Hales is through on Toklove. Back across the front of her, coming into turn at number 1. 1.5 laps to go. Hales is going to send it in down the inside of Trott. He doesn't wait around, does he? The champion-elect, Toby Hales, looking for a big result here in Peterborough this afternoon to confirm victory in the 2021 Nationals. Hits the front. He's going to make it 3 wins out of 3. Freddie Trott dropping back into the path of Leah Toklove once again, but I think he's got just about enough in hand. Took a look over his shoulder as he came around the final 2 turns and comfortably consolidates second position. Toklove over the line for third. This will be her best heat points haul of this 2021 campaign. Much improved today, Leah Toklove. Her third ride, her weakest of the 3 qualifying races, but she finishes nonetheless on 37. An excellent effort from her. 45 out of a possible 45 for Toby Hales. 3 wins out of 3. Heats 4, 5, and now Heat 10 going the way of the number 20. Well, Freddie Trott Jr. with another good ride as well. Full credit to him. 12 points in that one. He finishes on 34. Never out of the top 3 positions in his 3 qualifying races. And Conrad Little rounds out a close top 4 after top 3 finishes in his opening 2 rides, including a victory in heat number 7. The best he can manage there is 4th, but that's to his credit nonetheless. As I said, in that company, another respectable result for Little. James Woodruff rounds out your top 5, but it's all about the big 4 in heat number 10, or moving on to today's grand final. Alan Birtwistle versus Jack Bell next up, both winners in the second round of heats. Bell the favourite, he's got a front row start. Birtwistle, after his earlier drop points, needs a top 3 finish here. He's lining up from the back row. Chris Brock and Wesley Aegis from the middle row, they're the key men. Both still harbour hopes of qualification. Brock probably needs a 3rd, while Aegis in particular looks hard pressed after only managing 6th place in his opening ride. He'll likely need at least 2nd. Jack Bell, the favourite then, goes from gate 2 on the front row, the number 93, he's on 25 points. Guy Horner, the only other rider on the front row, the number 233, he's on 11. Joseph Brindley, the number 68, he's on 12. Chris Brock, the number 420, he's on 20 points. Wesley Aegis, the number 111, he's on 19, he's in the danger zone. 197, Wag Scott on 10, and Alan Birtwistle, 21 points, the winner of heat 8. Jack Bell, predictably, is first away. Chris Brock immediately up into 2nd position. It's another good start from the number 420. Alan Birtwistle comes around the outside of him, gets pinned up against the safety fence down the back straight, but still keeps fighting on through. Aegis up into 4th place, but he needs to make further progress, and this is not looking good at all for Wesley Aegis. Alan Birtwistle will now attempt to close down Jack Bell, the pre-race favourite and the early race leader, but this 2nd position, if he holds on to it, should be enough for Birtwistle to move through, particularly after his victory last time out. Wesley Aegis beginning to make up ground on Chris Brock. Brock cannot afford to let Aegis through. 3rd position as things stand may well be enough for Brock to move through on 30 points to today's grand final. If he drops behind Wesley Aegis though, he'll drop onto 29 points from 3 rounds, and that looks much more precarious. Out in front, Birtwistle continuing to make progress, but he's not quite there at the moment on Jack Bell. Aegis meanwhile has got the gap down to less than a bike length on Chris Brock, and he makes his move coming off turn 2, and this could be crucial in determining the last of those qualification positions. Aegis through and up into 3rd place. This would move him onto 29 points if things stay as they are, while Chris Brock, relegated down, would also move on to 29 for 4th position, and he's dropping back dramatically from Aegis. He's not going to be able to make further progress from there. Into the final lap, the 2 race leaders, the number 93 Jack Bell, looking set for a 2nd consecutive race victory, still hoping to move his way onto the front row of the grid for today's grand final. A few big guns still to come in heat number 12. Remains to be seen how things shake down, but what is for sure is that both Bell and Birtwistle, after finishing 1st and 2nd there in heat number 11, will march on to today's grand final. Jack Bell takes his 2nd race victory of the day. Alan Birtwistle with a 2nd top 3 finish of the afternoon, but the interest really of that race was behind them. Chris Brock and Wesley Aegis scrapping over the last of the top 3 finishes, the last of the double figure points paying positions in that one, heat 11, and eventually it is Wesley Aegis who comes through on Chris Brock. It means the pair both finish on 29. Aegis will take a position above Chris Brock on countback, of course, by virtue of his superior result there in each of those 2 riders' final qualifying outing. And with Rob Meir, Jordan Miller and Paul Young all still to come in heat number 12, not to mention William Smith, I don't think that's going to be enough for either Wesley Aegis or Chris Brock to qualify, particularly as George Sturgis has also finished on 29 points and has the superior 3rd round result with a 12-point score from heat 9. The point situation incredibly close then for the last of the spots in the grand final, and I doubt we'll see much change here. The 2 riders who could make an impression, this man William Smith and also Luke Gardner, both line up off the back row, and they've got tough company here. Jordan Miller looking for a win to move up onto the front row of the grid for the grand final. Rob Meir and Paul Young, both heat winners in the opening round of races. In full, it's the number 105 Sam Neville from the pole. He's on 14 points. The number 19 Jordan Miller, he's on 22. The number 31 Paul Cooper, he's on 14. From the middle row, Stephen Gurnhill, the number 217, he's on 17 points. The number 500 Rob Meir, he's on 25, already a heat winner. The number 16 Simon Gray, he's on 9. From the back row of the grid, the number 129 William Smith, he's on 19 points. Remember 30 we've been talking about as being the crucial figure. The number 75 Paul Young, he's on 27. And the number 159 Luke Gardner, he is on 18. Heat 12 then, Smith and Gardner need big recoveries from the back row of the grid. It's all about Miller versus Mir up towards the head of the field. It's Paul Cooper who takes the whole shot from the outside of the front row. Miller not making good starts here this afternoon. He recovers to the inside line now on Sam Neville for second place. Mir comes around the outside of Neville for third. Cooper may well lose that lead by the end of the opening lap. He does. Miller is past. Miller moves Cooper out of the way. The two former Speedway men second and third. Paul Young has gone down. Young trying to challenge his way through on the inside line. Falls at turn one. That's going to leave him in disastrous state of affairs as far as seeding position to today's grand final. So that's caught us by surprise in Heat 12. Moved quickly through to fifth position did Paul Young from the back row of the grid. And now he's having to recover under yellow flags, of course, initially after Young falls on the racing line. This is the scrap for third place now. Sam Neville recovering to the inside of Paul Cooper. Cooper using that Speedway knowledge, making the fast start off the front row of the grid, but he's now gone to the back of the three riders who were on that front row, and Rob Mir has got through on Jordan Miller for the race lead. Boy oh boy, the last of the qualifying heats, and it's been action-packed start to finish. Mir escapes away, Miller dropping well back, still the race for third position held at the moment, and as things stand by Sam Neville, he's now starting to come under pressure from the late recovery from William Smith. Smith though out of shape coming off turn number 2. If he gets through here, it'll move him on to 29 points. Yet another rider on 29 points at the end of the heat programme. Paul Cooper continuing to drop back, loses another position in the latter stages here to Stephen Gurnhill. Up at the head of the field, it's going to be a comfortable victory for Rob Mir. The number 500 taking his second win of the day. Second over the line eventually will be Jordan Miller, but he couldn't get the race win he needed to move himself up onto the front row of the grid in terms of seeding order for today's grand final. So he's going to have to come through from the middle row. Third position in heat number 12 goes the way of Sam Neville, but he dropped too many points in his second ride to have any hope of moving through to the grand final, so that's going to be of little consolation to him. Crucially, William Smith restricted to fourth. That leaves him on 28 points. That will not be enough for him to qualify inside the top 12 today. The full results of Heat 12, and I can confirm William Smith misses out on qualification by just 2 points. Luke Gardner could make no progress from 8th. And that leaves us with a three-way tie for the last of the 12 grand final spots. George Sturgis beats Wesley Aegis and Chris Brock, who were 3rd and 4th respectively in Heat 10. Aegis, Brock and Smith score 3, 2 and 1 championship points respectively, while the top 12 now move forward to contest the grand final for the big 20 points. Toby Hales is top seed, unbeaten during the heats. Remember, if he wins this afternoon, what would be a 3rd final in a row, he will be national champion. No scores carried through from the qualifiers, of course. This is winner takes all, but Hales has been the fastest man out there so far today, little doubt about that. And the two men sitting closest to him in the championship, Jack Bell has qualified well as 2nd seed, but Jordan Miller has only managed to place on the 2nd row.
Sorry for the slight confusion there.
Reminder of the championship standings ahead of this penultimate grand final of the 2021 season. It's Toby Hales who leads by 18 points ahead of Jack Bell. They are the top 2 seeds to this grand final here in Peterborough this afternoon as well. The continued absence of Gary Birtwistle means that Jordan Miller, Rob Mir, the likes of Paul Young further back on the grid as well, have an opportunity to move up provisionally into the championship podium positions, the top 3, with Gary Birtwistle also looking set to miss the final round of the campaign in a week's time. Toby Hales then is the first rider released onto the circuit to select his gate position for this grand final. Undefeated during the heats, the winner of heats 4, 5 and 10. And Toby Hales looks to have gone for gate 3 there on the front row. 2nd seed to the final, Jack Bell, the number 93. He scored 5 points fewer than Toby Hales during the heats. His only defeat coming in heat 3. He was beaten by Paul Young and Neil McQueen. Didn't have the pace to find his way through on those two. He will now slot in on the inside of Toby Hales by the looks of it. So Jack Bell will go for gate number 2. The top 2 in the current championship standings. Hales, remember, on 56 championship points. Bell, after a 2nd place behind Hales last time out in Kings Lynn, on 38 championship points. 3rd seed to this grand final, the number 500, Rob Mir. So the top 3 from Kings Lynn last time out are the top 3 in the same order in terms of seeding positions to today's grand final. Rob Mir, the number 500, 40 points, the same score as Jack Bell. but Mir was defeated in the second round of heats by Jack Bell in heat number 6. He slots in now. He'll be going for the pole. Rob Mir, known as a fast starter, will have the inside of the front row, which will leave us with Leah Toklove on the outside. So Rob Mir, Jack Bell, Toby Hales and Leah Toklove will be row 1. Toklove getting the applause of the crowd as she makes her way into position. 37 points scored during the heats, her best display in the qualifying stages, and comfortably so in 2021 as well. She was the winner of heat 1. She was second in heat 6, third in heat 10. Fifth seed to this grand final, the number 7, Neil McQueen, on 36 heat points. He was very impressive and consistent throughout as well. The winner of heat 9. He's gone for gate 3 on that second row. Next to choose, the number 253, Freddie Trott Jr. 34 points. He was one of 3 riders tied on 34, alongside Jordan Miller and Conrad Little, and that's the seeding order in which they have qualified. So McQueen going for gate 3. Freddie Trott Jr. prefers gate 4. Jordan Miller next into position. Crucial race this for him in the context of the championship, after finishing in 4th position in each of the last 2 rounds in the Amman Valley in July and in Kings Lynn last month. He's hoping to make his way onto the championship podium, and will be looking for a first DTRA podium at senior level and at pro level here this afternoon as well. Completing that second row of the grid, the number 69, Conrad Little. He scored 34 points. Just a point behind him in the heat stages, Alan Birtwistle. Now, Birtwistle on the number 30 could well have scored 9 points more than he did. If he'd been on 40, that would have been enough for a place on the front row of the grid. Instead, a fall from the lead in his opening outing, heat 1, sees him stranded back on the 3rd row. And as 9th seed, he's gone for the outside of that back row. Paul Young goes for gate 3 on the back row. He's another rider who missed out on scoring after failing to pick up major points last time out in heat number 12 for a fall on turns 1 and 2. Fergus Bluff and George Sturgis completing that 3rd row of the grid on the inside of him. The grand final, the 4th of this 2021 season, gets underway, and it's Rob Mir who takes the whole shot. Toby Hales relegated down to 3rd position. Oh, a nasty incident there for Leah Toklove. She's gone down, and she's collected, I think, by Freddie Trott Jr., who started directly behind her on the grid. This one's going to have to be stopped. Red flags and red lights in the grand final. Toklove immediately running on to the infield, but she looked to be in some discomfort there, and hardly surprising after she was clattered with some force by the number 253, Freddie Trott, who is also down at the moment on the circuit. Toklove thankfully straight back up to her feet after a brilliant seeding position, brilliant effort during the qualifying heat. She didn't make a good start there off gate number 4. She gets trapped back in the pack, squeezed up in between Neil McQueen and Toby Hales, who's turning back across her path. They're 3 abreast coming off turn 2, and Toklove is the odd one out, goes down in the path of Freddie Trott. That really is a nasty incident for Leah Toklove. Great to see that she's straight back up and on board her machine, and collecting herself ahead of this restaging of the grand final here at Peterborough. Well, it seems almost a rarity these days that we get through a grand final without incident or a restart. Certainly Kings Lynn had to be repeated on 3 occasions before we finally got to the finish, but that's a circumstance of the field being as closely packed as ever, and 15 laps in the grand final compared to just 6 during the heat stages. Leah Toklove back into position. Unfortunately, we are without Freddie Trott for the restaging of the grand final, so 11 riders only. Trott will be declared in 12th position. The penultimate round of the 2021 season. The grand final gets underway for a second time of asking. Better start this time around from Toby Hales, but he's moved aside in the run down to turn 1 by Rob Mir. That opens the door to Jack Bell to hit the front, and Conrad Little to come through for second place. Hales relegated as far down as 5th position before getting back around the outside of Neil McQueen in towards turn 3. So he moves back into 4th place, but he's well adrift of the race lead and the position he needs to seal the championship with a round to spare. Mir through on the inside of Little. Little locking up so ever so slightly coming off turn 2. The momentum now is with Toby Hales, who will try and battle his way through into 3rd position. So Hales recovering a podium place. Hasn't been outside of the podium places in this 2021 campaign so far. That doesn't look set to change this afternoon. Hales, who was at 2nd position first time out at the Greenfield Oval, who made a last bend pass on Gary Birtwistle, remember, in the Amman Valley to take his first victory of the season, then backed it up with victory 3 weeks ago at Kings Lynn. Miller through now on the inside of Conrad Little. Little tries to recover coming off turn 2. Good battle here between the two red machines as they make their way side by side in towards turn 3. And this is a valiant effort from Conrad Little in his second appearance of this 2021 campaign. He was competitive at the Greenfield Oval back in June. He's competitive again here today. We return our focus to those podium places though. Jack Bell escaping away out in front, just needs to keep a cool head from here on in. It's Rob Meir in second position. Toby Hales continuing to make up ground. He's cut that gap between himself and the number 500. Meir is hanging on for dear life now, having been the main antagonist to Toby Hales on the opening lap, moved Hales out of the way. Hales is not going to think twice about doing the same to Meir if he gets the opportunity, and he doesn't need to, because Meir left the door wide open there coming around the top turn, and Rob Meir, as ever, beginning to fade as this race distance goes on. We're heading into the second half of the action now with Jack Bell out in front, but Toby Hales has got the pace. He's picked off Rob Meir. He is escaping away. That looks like Conrad Little, who has gone down around turns 3 and 4. What a shame for Little after a brilliant display throughout the early stages of this grand final. So it's going to be Conrad Little, who is the second man to miss out at the grand final stage, as we watch Neil McQueen and Leah Toklove scrapping a little bit further back down the order. Toklove, despite a front row grid slot, you fancy, somewhat perturbed by the initial incident and probably somewhat uncomfortable after that crash as well, but she's continuing valiantly on. She's in 8th position as things stand. Back to the front, it's Jack Bell still leading. Toby Hales continuing to make progress, but I don't know if he's going to have enough time to make his move to close down the race leader. He is continuing to reel him in. He's left Rob Meir well and truly for dead back in 3rd position. The gap has remained static between Bell and Meir. The man who's making the progress is Toby Hales, but is there time enough? Bell looks over his shoulder. He knows he's got plenty in hand for the moment over Toby Hales, but he also knows that this could be decisive in the context of the championship. A momentary bobble there coming off turn 4 for Jack Bell, who's set now to encounter lap traffic. I think that's George Sturgis up ahead in 10th position. He'll be the first man that they meet. Sturgis surely will get well and truly out of the way. He does so on the top turn. So the leaders coming into lap traffic. Jack Bell is going to be the first to meet them. That's going to give the impetus to Toby Hales, who's got that gap now down to just a couple of bike lengths. It's going to be close in the closing stages here between Jack Bell and Toby Hales. Role reversal compared to Kings Lynn, where Jack Bell was the man coming on strong. This time it's Toby Hales who's almost there, coming off turn number 4. 2 laps to go. Bell it is who leads it. Hales is in for a dramatic conclusion to this 2021 championship. He's going to be pushed every inch of the way, but here he goes. Toby Hales launches his move into the top turn. Bell doesn't have the answer. Toby Hales is going to be the 2020 UK National Champion. 1 lap to go to defend the lead. Has Bell got the answer? Meir pushing hard in the closing stages to see if he can get on terms and capitalise on these two coming to blows, but I don't think they're going to. Toby Hales exits turn 4 for the final time here at Peterborough to take his 3rd victory of the 2021 campaign and confirm himself UK National Flat Track Champion for the 2nd time. Brilliant ride that from Toby Hales. He was moved out of the way by Rob Meir in the run down to turn 1. He was relegated outside of the podium positions altogether. His main rival Jack Bell was allowed to escape away in clear air at the head of the field, but Hales would not be denied. He was relentless, and with a lap to spare finds his way through on the number 93. We've got an identical podium to that which we had at Kings Lynn 3 weeks ago. It's a win once again for Toby Hales, his 3rd in succession. It's back-to-back podiums for Jack Bell and another runner-up slot for him. His time surely will come. He's coming on stronger and stronger with each passing round. 3rd position goes to Rob Meir, a familiar slot for him. He hasn't finished in any other ranking in this 2021 campaign in his 3 appearances, but he too is knocking on the door of a potential race victory in the future. It was a robust first turn from Meir. He was picked off later on by Hales. What a sensational ride from 4th to 1st, and what a way to confirm the 2021 UK National Champion. Couldn't be a more deserving rider, particularly after that kind of performance from Toby Hales. Unbeaten from 4 rides here this afternoon in Peterborough. Hales does it again in the grand final. 2nd place going the way of Jack Bell. Less than 3/10 of a second in it between them, and less than a second covering your podium trio. Rob Meir, the odd one out, in 3rd. Best of the rest, Jordan Miller, just as he was at Kings Lynn 3 weeks ago. And a good recovery from both Paul Young and Alan Birtwistle from the back row of the grids. So Jordan Miller and Rob Meir both move above the injured Gary Birtwistle, and just 2 points separate them ahead of the final round in what now looks a two-rider fight for bronze. Paul Young secures his best result to date with 5th, and it's a strong return to the DTRA for Alan Birtwistle with 6th. But as we leave the East of England showground at the end of what's been an entertaining day's racing, little doubt about that, Toby Hales holds an unassailable 22-point series lead over Jack Bell, and Hales celebrates his 2nd national championship with a round to spare in 2021.